I went from making $1 million a year in income as a consultant, almost 90% profit margin. I threw all that away and invested whatever I had into real estate, put whatever was left into just the first couple months of PitchIt, and paid myself $0. And we emerged with a really solid case study, and then privately sent that case study out, 130 meetings or so, looking for the right seed investor who would have really good resources to help us with our go-to-market. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And that's when we said, okay, we lost all our money and we didn't know if we were going to get it back. Less than 1% of startups asking for funding actually get it. And less than 0.1% of businesses overall get VC funding. You can get 20 investors in a room and get 20 totally different answers, but you just need one to fall in love.
Okay, so welcome back to the Fold Global podcast. Today, I'm excited to have Paul Kleen with us, founder of PitchIt. Paul's journey is fascinating. He started as a data scientist and consultant for companies like Uber and Hilton, and then transformed his consulting business into PitchIt, which is an AI-powered platform that has already helped companies qualify over 100,000 leads, I guess, and generate around 300 million in revenue for them. Along this way, he raised 2.5 million in seed funding and secured large clients like T-Mobile. So, Paul, did I miss any key milestones or numbers you'd like to add to this introduction?
I mean, it's right that, well, it's 500,000 leads now. That number grows a lot. I mean, we have thousands per day that are coming through. And so depending on when you look at our numbers, that each day we really growing a lot on how many leads we're qualifying.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so let's focus on the fundraising. That's the main topic of this discussion, right? So you've mentioned having over 130 investor meetings before closing your 2.5 mil seed round, right? That's quite an effort, frankly speaking. So you also talked about breaking your fundraising journey into phases, like starting with friends and family, then moving to this angel investors, right? And eventually securing funding from VC firms like Silicon Road Ventures, right? Mm-hmm. So can you walk us through that journey in maybe more detail?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that for the record, that is how most funding is raised. I don't think that most funding is raised like from the TV show Silicon Valley, where you meet one person and like Mark Cuban just gives you a $5 million check right outside of your demo day of an accelerator program. I'm sure that some people have it like that. I know one founder total who had it that way, but most of us who are first-time founders do not have it that easy, right? The road is really long and hard, and you make the announcement about a year after you've been raising and deploying. And so it's more about like a capstone of the round is actually closed now. You're not raising any more money on those terms. And it's more about the accomplishments that you've had. But you probably have in the bank about like, a fraction of what you've raised because you've been deploying it while raising. That's just what I've found. And frankly, VC firms do the same thing. They might announce that they've just closed their third fund at 100 million, but they've probably already made 20 or 30 investments along the way out of that third fund. And so that's the first part. But to answer it more specifically, we did start with just one check, $200K from Rahim, the co-founder of Plug and Play. And his family office made that investment, the Amidi Group. And it was like pitch deck only, no customers, no software product. We had a consulting company at the time. We were doing growth, marketing, data science, just general consulting. And we had figured out that there was this multi-channel customer experience problem that needed some software solution. And we didn't know exactly what it was going to be that we built, but they gave us some money, some pre-seed money to go out there and get it. And then we went and did some friends and family and angel fundraising through Pasadena Angels and just people that we knew. And that got us another $180,000. Then we got into Alchemist Accelerator and Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And that's when we said, okay, we lost all our money and we didn't know if we were going to get it back. And we thankfully did, but clearly that was the end of pre-seed. I mean, it was done. There was no point taking meetings with people. They were terrified and basically trying to figure out where they're going to put their money and not interested in actually spending it with anyone. So we took a really long hiatus. That was probably the worst time to come out of an accelerator program and try to raise funding, right? And so we just got to work on customers and bootstrapping. It felt like bootstrapping because we had so little in the bank at the time. And we were very fortunate to get into a pilot with one of the bigger distributors of T-Mobile, and that helped us kind of fine tune what we were going to build and who we were going to build it for. And we emerged with a really solid case study, and then privately sent that case study out. Probably 130 meetings or so, and looking for the right seed investor who would see where we're coming from, but also have really good resources to help us with our go to market. And so that's when we found Silicon Road Ventures, and they led a priced round, a seed round for us. And Gray Ventures joined in. That was the first check that they gave us. And the rest is kind of put into the press release. So the rest is really history. And that's when we closed the seed round at $2.5 million. And it was a really long journey from start to finish, 100 and maybe 150 meetings total between all of them for 17 checks and probably 12 to 15 months total journey, start to finish, which was double the amount of time that it normally takes. But look at what we were dealing with, right? The raw materials given to us in that economy were pretty terrible. So it was pretty hard to take those like subordinary inputs and get extraordinary outputs. We eventually got it done, but it just took longer.
And looking back at those meetings, what was your biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway that I had was you can get 20 investors in a room and get 20 totally different answers, but you just need one to fall in love.
Okay.
You don't want 20 people to like what you're doing or subscribe or give you an LOI or give you a high five, right? Or give you like the proverbial 5 out of 5 score that they give you at all of these different summits when they're rating pitches. What really only mattered was, is one investor at Silicon Road Ventures, for example, gonna give me a check? And everyone else doesn't really matter. I mean, you could get 129 no's and then get one yes that opens up the door to raise $7 million. And you don't care that it was the 130th person or the seventh person from a founder's point of view. But a founder, the biggest takeaway I had was that a founder needs to learn that it's probably not going to be the seventh. It's probably going to be the 137th that says yes. And that's just the reality of every company who's going to fundraise, no matter how attractive you are. And it's not because you have a shit product in a shit market and they don't like you, and you're ugly and a loser and they don't want to give you money, right? It's none of those things that you go home thinking. It really is probably that you're just not a fit for their thesis, right? That's the hardest pill to swallow, that they're saying no out of a technicality.
So it means that you didn't notice any specific patterns in what investors were looking for, right?
I think that the pattern was that I found was that if I turn every stone over, I will eventually find the right one. And so this is what entrepreneurs are really good at, is that there is no known pattern. Otherwise, it would have been totally exploited by everybody. So if there was a pattern that was easy to discern, everybody would have funding. But nobody has funding. It's so hard. What, less than 1% of startups asking for funding actually get it? And less than 0.1% of businesses overall get VC funding, right? That means that the pattern is really, really hard to understand. And so it's not easy to come up with. And I think that the pattern really came down to like, who's the person asking for funding? That's probably the pattern, is that this person is a serial entrepreneur. They know how to find raw materials, combine them, create something that's worth money, and then convince people through really hard work that they're the one, right? And get them more than just interested, but get them to fall in love with you kind of all at the same time, so that you could do a round, create FOMO, get the terms, and then actually get them to wire the money, right? That's the pattern, is that it just takes a ton of really hard work from a founder.
Yeah, and after that meetings, like after each of them, did you change how you pitched pitch it over time?
I tried to let my customers dictate that more than investors.
Customers.
hmm Yeah, I didn't
What does it
formally
mean?
pivot. So I never pivoted PitchIt unless
Uh-huh.
customers told me that
Uh-huh.
they wanted to pivot. So I listened to the market more than VCs. And there is a difference between product market fit, which comes from customer feedback, and that's what leads to revenue and prevents churn, product market fit, and then investor market fit. And founders can pursue both or one over the other. And a lot of founders, before they have product market fit, actually look for investor market fit. So they'll say something like, here's like a perfect example in a microcosm. I'm going to apply to Y Combinator, and until I get in, I'm not quitting my job. That is a perfect example of what I think is the worst way to start a company, which is what will get me funding. That's what I care about. And that's investor market fit. And they're going to keep pivoting and applying to Y Combinator until they get a yes. And until they get that yes, they're not going to actually go and see if there's product market fit. And so I think that is the wrong way. Like pivot, create a new pitch deck every time you get a no from an investor. No, we only changed our business once. One really big product, no, two really big product pivots, and they both came from customer feedback. And that I think is the most important critical thing. Listen to your customers, pivot when your customers show you that you need to pivot, listen to the market and get your revenue up. And then eventually you will have investor market fit, and it should come after product market fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, I know that your consulting business was, from my understanding, was high profitable and helped you bootstrap this early stages of PitchIt, right? So, and I know that you've mentioned this, that it sometimes detracted you from the product side. So how did investors react to the fact that you were running a consulting business alongside PitchIt? Did they see this as a string or a potential distraction?
Well, I must be crazy because I was making a lot more money doing consulting as like an individual household,
Okay.
right? Than I've made to date as a
Okay.
CEO of PitchIt, right? But the answer to your question is that investors will want you to not be working on side
Yeah.
projects
Yeah.
before they give you any real money, right? And so this is like another reason why fishing for investor market fit on the sidelines is usually not a good use of your time, because they're looking for personality traits, right? And that's again, like, it brings it back to the pattern is the founder and the personality of the founding team on whether or not you think they can take raw materials from a market, figure out how to create subordinary inputs with those raw materials, and then combine them to get extraordinary outputs. And that's extremely challenging to do. And it takes a human being to figure that out, right? In the right place at the right time. And so
Yeah.
they're fishing for personality traits. And if you go into an investor meeting, and at least this worked for me, and everybody's a little different, every raise is different, but I went in and I just said, I went from making $1 million a year in income as a consultant, almost 90% profit margin, right? Name your price, take on as many customers as you possibly can. I had like 2 employees. It was so profitable. I threw all that away and invested whatever I had into real estate, and then put whatever was left into just the first couple months of PitchIt, and paid myself $0 for 9 months, right? You see someone that does that, and you think, well, this person is insane, but clearly knows how to make money, and walked away from something that was making a lot of money for this idea. So this idea must be huge, and it must need a lot of upfront investment before it can be obviously a good investment. And so if we want to get really good returns, we should double down on this, just like Paul is, because Paul is investing, let's just assume $1 million a year in income is now zero. He's investing $1 million a year in opportunity costs. So he must think this could be worth hundreds of millions, or he'd be crazy to make this switch. And so if we're going to give $1 million as an investor and we need 30x returns to return our fund, right? Then this is the kind of signal we're looking for in a founding team, is can a founder identify opportunities that are this valuable and then take the actions and be obvious about those actions that make it look like they're convinced that this is the best. And so that's what I did. And I think that consulting is a great breeding place because it teaches you how to be profitable and build a team and make a product out of other people's inputs and sell it for something that's marked up. That's like half the skills you need as a tech entrepreneur, right? And it's usually the ones that are missing from engineering founders that have never really had to sell anything before. And so if you can bring that plus the engineering talent, and you find the right like market and idea, it can be pretty compelling, even for first time founders. So I think a consulting company usually is where, if I had to guess, I would say most first time founders either come from big tech companies that were building the solution in house that they're now going to create externally to the platform, or they were consultants and doing a lot of projects for companies and then they started seeing a pattern and built a platform out of it. I think that's the two most common places that are going to make the VC backed startups.
Okay. And just maybe a question that I'm curious about. At what point did you feel comfortable enough to fully transition away from consulting and focus solely on PitchIt? So, as far as I understood, it wasn't a decision influenced by your investors, right? It was your decision.
Yeah, not influenced at all by investors, and it was from customers. One of my customers was paying me for consulting, and his name was Sam Bigdelli, and he called me and he said, "What could be turned into software that you're doing manually right now? Because clearly a lot of people are paying you to do this. This is a big problem, and your solution right now is to stack together a bunch of stuff that automates this, provide it as a solution and package it at a markup that's really high in markup. But you're making $1 million a year when you could probably be making 50 million a year as a software solution, like a service that's being delivered using something like AI. And this was kind of on the eve of like AI coming out publicly as a solution that you could use to take tools and create a solution. And he said, I think you should part ways with the consulting and build this as a software. And that is kind of that incepted my mind into maybe this is the time, because I had been fishing for that idea for some time, and we had come up with a few that never really turned into much. We couldn't find a way to replicate it or get a case study that was meaningful or find any defensibility or moat potential. And so it was just challenging. But there was this one idea that Sam and I were working on, and I was delivering it to him as a consulting service that was the kind of alpha version of PitchIt. And that was, again, it comes back to like what made me make these decisions. It was a customer, and they're the ones paying you. So that's the market, right? That's the only feedback that has ever mattered to me as an entrepreneur. I rarely pay much attention to what investors say.
Yeah, that's so true. So, and after that, 150 meetings with investors and eventually raising 2.5 mil. What are the top maybe three things you wish you had known before starting your fundraising journey?
My friend, who was the former CEO and founder of Giraffe, said that you were going to need 90 meetings to raise a round. And at the time, I was thinking, oh my God, that's impossible. I don't know 90 investors. I knew like 6. And those were the ones that invested in frame data. And I thought that was enough. No, it's nowhere close to enough, right? And I think what I would have liked to have known is that the market was about to tank. And so 90 was actually conservative and we needed like 150 or something. So I guess I thought the difficulty was hard, but it was actually very hard. And I would have liked to have been able to have seen that 6 months after leaving the consulting business, the market would tank, so that I could have planned mentally for actually having a very hard fundraise. And I did not know that it was going to be very hard. I thought it was just going to be hard.
Got it. Got it. So probably my last question: what specific mistakes did you make during this process that others could learn from?
There isn't anything that I think was a mistake. We made pivots because customers wanted product X, and then you found problems delivering that solution at scale. And so we pivot to product Y, and you find problems delivering at scale. And then product Z, we stuck with. And you could probably look back and say, had I just built product Z from the get-go, that would have been much better. We would have saved a year or 6 months or whatever. But that also assumes that building product X and Y were a mistake. And I don't really think so. I think it was just iterations on an idea. And you didn't get like WD-40 without WD-1 through 39 failing, right? And so I don't know if you could really look back and say that any of those earlier iterations of ours were mistakes. So I didn't make any mistakes there. And I also didn't raise funding from people that ended up being a bad fit for us.
Okay.
So PitchIt, I wouldn't take a single thing back. There are ways that we could have saved time. I mean, we could have saved time if I knew about this idea and if I had known who would invest in it. But I think that's impossible to actually know that kind of stuff,
It's a
right?
part of the journey.
The only mistake I made was putting all of our money into Silicon Valley Bank. That should have been a bank that I avoided forever. But who could have known these things before they went down? They were the startup-friendly bank. Everybody used it.
100%. Paul, it's been a pleasure hearing about your journey with PitchIt. I think many founders will benefit from your insights. Thanks again for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.